Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good weekend. Today we're going to cover Chapter 4, Society and Social Interaction. So, we've covered society. You should know what the definition of that is, but it does come up again today. So we're going to cover it really quickly. So society is what? A definable community and that shares the same culture, right? We've already gone over this. Orange County, LA County, these are all cultures, and within those counties and there's going to be cities, and within those cities there are going to be different, cultural, ethnic backgrounds with different value systems. Okay, so we've already gone over that. What we haven't gone over is technological sophistication and industrialized society and how those two work together and why they're important. And the reason why they're important is because it's us. We are an industrialized society. That's the world that we live in. That is part of our culture. That's part of, essentially what makes us us in the world that we live in. Okay, now, industrialized societies are created and sustained through technological sophistication. So as society advances, so does its use of technology. Okay, and that's not a very difficult concept to understand. I mean, God, every single day it seems like there's some new type of technology that's been created to help us live a easier, smoother life, right? When you think about it, and just look at our cell phones, right? Look at the progression of cell phones. I mean, first it was a situation where I'm sure most of you may not even remember a world where payphones were a thing, right? And then even before that, payphones weren't always a thing. So technology, payphones, you switched over to pagers over to cell phones, and then even cell phones themselves have changed. We don't carry phones in our pockets anymore. We carry little tiny supercomputers. And look what we were able to do with our little tiny supercomputers, our iPhones and our whatever other type of phone you use. It's a smartphone. You can literally, depending on how you have it set up, you can control the security system in your house. You can unlock your car. You can use it as a map. You can essentially handle everything you need to handle through your phone. Okay, that is a huge, huge technological advancement within our society. Okay, so essentially at this point now, there's nobody on the planet, well, as long as you have a cell phone, who can't be contacted. Okay, so industrialized societies rely on technological sophistication to move forward. Okay, and another example of that would be even just the way that we manipulate our surroundings. Okay, so what's important about technological advancement and industrialized societies is that technology allows us to almost be autonomous from the environments that we live in. What I mean by this is we're able to live in environments, in climates, in certain parts of the world, in certain areas, in ways that we weren't able to live in them before because we have technology to help us. Okay, so an example that would be like Southern California. Southern California is a desert, by and large. And the water that we have access to in Southern California is water that we do not have here naturally. The water we have here in Southern California that we use, that we rely on, is a result of technology. You have huge aqueducts, you have entire infrastructure, entire system that ensures that water from Northern California and other states comes down here for us to use. That is technology. Technology used to change the environment. Technology used to manipulate the environment in such a way where we can, survive. The whole reason why we have water down here in Southern California is because Southern California, for most part, was used for agriculture. So they needed water, and water they got. Tons of it. That's why we have actually pretty good drinking water here in Southern California, particularly Santa Ana has pretty good drinking water. So technological sophistication helps drive us forward, and it enables us to essentially live in areas of the world, or live in areas of the state, or live in the country where we can control the environment. Okay, we control our surroundings. So economic production is a very important concept, especially when it comes to pre-industrial societies. well, mainly for pre-industrial societies. And what economic production is, or what the concept does, is it argues that economic production, essentially whatever it is, you, let's say if you, in pre-industrial societies, it was rural agrarian life, right? So this is farm life, okay? And the amount of produce or the amount of material that you can produce for sale, so whatever you can harvest, whatever it is that you can get from the land that you're working, was going to be limited to the amount of labor that you can do as an individual. So the idea is, as a human, I'm only so strong, okay? So as a species, there's only so much we can do. We're not as strong as other animals, not even close, actually. I mean, horses, cows, mules, those animals are, compared to us, much stronger, okay? But we ourselves, or the economic production, is going to be limited to the amount of labor that we can produce, okay? So labor, or the amount of labor that can be, the amount of labor, the level of labor we have, will determine the amount of economic production, okay? So the reason why this is important when it comes to pre-industrial society is that pre-industrial societies, well, essentially what it was is the society that existed before the Industrial Revolution, essentially machining, okay? Engines, steam engines, electric engines, So the idea is pre-industrial life, rural agrarian life, could not advance. So technological sophistication was still at a point where manpower, or what we could do as individuals, determine how successful we were going to be. Once the Industrial Revolution hit, that essentially changed our production levels. Okay, so in pre-industrial society, economic production was limited to manpower for the most part. And we had animals and we had some machines, but not like the Industrial Revolution. So it's a very important concept. There were few specialized occupations. This is another very important concept with economic production, well, essentially with pre-industrial societies. So in pre-industrial societies, you didn't have just one job. If you lived in a rural agrarian life, your family owned a farm, your job in that farm wasn't just feeding chickens or feeding pigs or livestock, or wasn't just working in the field or just working around the house or just fixing things. Your job was whatever needed to be handled on that farm. You woke up in the morning and you probably did maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 different things through the course of your workday. Okay? You were a carpenter, you were a blacksmith, you irrigated fields, you tended to animals, you were a veterinarian, like you did it all if you worked and lived on a farm. Okay? So in pre-industrial societies, there were not a lot of specialized occupations. Okay? Now then when the Industrial Revolution hit, it created specialized occupations. So people moved from rural agrarian farms into cities to work in large factories. Now that you're working in a large factory, your job is literally that one specialized occupation. It's putting, that wheel on, the axle of a car, and you're doing that hundreds of times, if not thousands of times a day. That is your job. You go to work, you do that one specific task on the assembly line, and that is it. That is completely different from the type of work you would have done in pre-industrial life or in a rural agrarian setting. Okay, and now I'm just going to run through quickly some of the types of pre-industrial societies. And the first one we're going to cover is going to be the hunter-gatherer. And the hunter-gatherer had the strongest reliance on the environment. And what this means is that the hunter-gatherer had no control over the environment. What I mean by this is they were not able to manipulate the environment in a way that they could sustain themselves. So essentially what it was they're foraging for food, berries, plants, whatever it is they can eat, and hunting. Okay, these groups or these societies were able to stay together through or survive through tribes and kinship networks. Okay, so the idea is that the single individual, the lone wolf, that doesn't make it. If you do not have a tribe or a kinship network, you are not going to make it. So this is very important. No specialized occupations with the hunter-gatherer, and they were nomadic. And really what this means is they were forced to travel or forced to follow food sources. Okay, so if I'm a hunter-gatherer and I rely on berries and certain types of fruits and vegetables, whatever it is that's growing in the surrounding areas. When the climate changes, when the seasons change, those food sources are not going to be available to me anymore. Okay, so I'm going to have to move and follow those food sources as the climate changes, as the weather changes. Okay, same thing with animals that I'm hunting. There's particular animals that I hunt and rely on as a food source, and those animals migrate. I had to migrate with them, so that makes me nomadic. I rely on my surroundings for survival. I do not have any ways to manipulate those surroundings and that environment. So when the food source moves and changes, I have to move and change with it. And those are your hunter-gatherers. The next would be pastoral, and there's horticulture, which I'm just going to skip. But really what I want to talk about are the two major advancements, okay, that kind of start to push us forward. And these would be considered technological and technologically sophisticated advancements, okay? So the two major advancements are going to be the domestication of animals and the ability to cultivate, okay? Now, what these two major advancements do is allow us to create surplus goods, which means that we can create, not just food that we need to eat for that day or the next couple of days, but enough to last us for some time. Okay, so this is surplus food, which allows for a lot of other things too. And what surplus food does, or what it allows for, is downtime. Okay, so if I have surplus food, I don't have to go out and keep hunting. I don't have to go out and keep working. I have enough food to last me, X amount of days or X amount of weeks, whatever the food source is. And that way it gives me time to do other things, okay, and develop other technologies, okay. Specialized occupations start to form. So maybe there's a situation now where men will start to do one particular task and women start to do another particular task, and then kids and so on and so forth. Okay, so now we're starting to see specialized occupations now because of surplus food, because there is downtime, because there is more time to kind of sit and be creative. Okay, with what type of work that we're doing, what type of I don't say occupations. It wouldn't be occupations at this point, not even close. But essentially, it allows us to sit down and figure things out, for the lack of a better term. Okay, like I said, and really just like I said, develop new technologies. And one of them would be domestication of animals. This is huge. Okay, when human societies began to recognize their ability to tame and breed animals for food, clothing, and transportation, this was a game changer. Okay, like I said before, humans, not particularly strong animals, not particularly fast. Okay, but the one thing that we have over a lot of other animals is just our intelligence. Okay, our ability to problem solve. But animals like this ox here, I think is what you call it, ox, bull, whatever you want to call it. An animal's much more powerful than us. Not as intelligent though, not even close. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and figure out that we can tame animals that we find within our environment. And once those animals are tamed, we can use them for labor. We can use them as a food source, and also use whatever products from those animals for clothing. Okay, and then there's cultivation. Okay, now the cultivation is growing of plants for consumption. Now, let's be clear here: cultivation is not agriculture. Okay, the distinction is going to be that cultivation is going to be limited to the area that you live in. So, say this is our community here, right? This image, right? We got dogs that we've domesticated. We got large animals we've domesticated. We got little makeshift houses that we're going to be building. Okay, we got some surplus food, right? We're growing whatever this type of food is here, or vegetable. Okay, but when the climate changes, we got to move. Okay, so at this point, still nomadic. Okay, and then we have agricultural societies, and this is when things essentially take off for us as a species. Okay, so there's definitely advancement in tool use. Okay, so pastoral and horticultural societies, they use tools, but they're temporary tools, sticks, things made out of wood. So the idea is that, like I said, output, right? So what I'm able to output as a human being is also going to be also going to be limited to the tools that I have access to, or the tools that I can create, right? So tools that are wooden, tools that are made out of stone, things like that, these aren't going to last very long, and they're not going to be as effective as stone tools. Okay, I meant to say like steel tools, bronze tools, things like that. So tools that are made out of metal, uh, in conjunction with animals. These are going to be, or these are going to definitely improve our output, our labor output. Okay, so agricultural societies relied on permanent tools for survival, and they really did. The image to the right, that's a permanent tool. That's a steel tool. That's a permanent tool. Okay, I mean, it probably needs to be fixed. I'm sure that eventually they do break down, but it's going to be something that's going to last much longer and produce much more for us based on the amount of labor we're able to use. Or not labor to use, but our labor is going to be increased by the use of this type of technology. Okay, so agricultural revolution made farming possible and profitable. So the difference between agriculture and cultivation is the fact that we're now staying in one spot. Okay, we're not moving anywhere. We're no longer nomadic. This is a very, very big deal for us as a species. Okay, so now I don't have to move. I can go ahead and stay on this one plot of land indefinitely for years. Okay, and through the use of technology, I'm able to do that. So advancement and sophistication or technological advancement allows me to no longer have to be nomadic. I don't have to follow food. I don't have to chase food. I can stay in one spot. Okay, rotation of crops. This is a technology. The idea or the ability to understand that, you know what, certain times of the year, certain foods grow. So maybe during the spring, we're growing this type of vegetable or type of fruit, whatever it is. And then once the seasons change, we're growing something else. Okay, so we're rotating out our crops. But another thing, though, that's important, and it is technology, is the idea of, well, if you have a particular plot of land and you keep growing on that land, eventually what happens is it depletes the nutrients in the soil. So you have to add fertilizers. Okay, so if you want to stay in one spot and, you know, farm the land all year long for years, what you have to do is replenish the nutrients in the soil, or else you're not going to yield anything from that land. So rotation of crops, that's technology. Reuse of waste products as fertilizer, that's technology. Okay, and surplus of food, and this is a huge surplus of food. Once again, once you have a surplus of food, you don't have to work as much as you used to, or actually probably work is going to be cut in half possibly. Okay, so now you're living in communities that are no longer nomadic. You have surplus of food, okay, and what happens now is that with surplus of food, you're able to change and barter, and actually something you're doing, you're just able to sell the surplus of food, okay. Now, what's important about that idea is that when you're able to sell, when you're able to barter, when you're able to stay in one place, okay, the concept of ownership, which wasn't around before agriculture for the most part, to a certain extent, it starts to develop and take on a whole new meaning. So now that we are in our agricultural society at this point, and I can stay on this land for years, what I want to do now is claim that land. This is my land. Okay, where before it wouldn't matter for the most part because, well, we're moving, we're nomadic, we're gonna travel where the food travels. Okay, so land ownership wasn't really crucial for survival. Now, in a society of agriculture, it is. Now you need to make sure that land belongs to you. Okay, so this pushes us into a feudal system. Okay, and a feudal system is essentially based off of land ownership. Okay, a few more points for agricultural societies. So settlements, small little agriculture areas turn into towns. Towns turn into cities, things like that. Okay, and it is what the agriculture society would be considered the dawn of civilization. And the reason why they consider the dawn of civilization is because it allowed individuals to develop leisures and humanities. Okay, so artisans were able to support themselves, musicians, painters, poets. Then you start to see creation of specified occupations. In the sense, like you maybe had somebody who was a blacksmith now, right? So you have a small town or a small city. It's rural and it's agrarian, but it's still a small little area. and you have somebody who may be a blacksmith, you have somebody who might make candles, you have somebody who might do certain things, and who might be able to make a living doing that one thing now because there's enough money to go around, there's enough surplus food to go around, okay? And another thing that you have starting to develop is the creation of diversity, and diversity through social class or hierarchical system, okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to have individuals who own land and individuals who do not, okay? This is important because this is the way things are going to this is going to set the tone for how things are going to, how society is going to be modeled, or the framework for society now, I'd even argue, okay? So as an individual who owns land, landowners is now a newer concept. So we've got landowners now, and the more land you own, the more wealthy you can become. The more wealthy you become, you now separate yourself from other individuals who do not own land. So those are going to be your peasants. So essentially you start seeing a creation of a class of individuals that are wealthy and poor, okay? And they called it class nobility. Essentially it's just status. And that is either you own land or you do not, okay? And the standing between men and women also started to increase. So in societies, or societies before agricultural societies, the argument is that men and women kind of did a lot of the same work because they had to. Now that we had rural agrarian life where we owned a farm, we had a house, the jobs and the tasks that men and women started doing started to become very specialized. So essentially it is that men's work started becoming work that was handled outside the home, and work that women handled was work that was inside the home. So it was men's work and women's work. Men's sphere, which is outside the home, and women's sphere, which is inside the home. Okay, and that's when we started seeing the development of that. All right, so this is the system, okay, a feudal system. And this is what we had in, pre-industrial societies. Okay, so like I said before, hierarchical system, but a very strict hierarchical system of power based around land, ownership, and protection. So essentially what it would be like fiefdoms is really what would it be. So if you own land, well, essentially the way it's set up. And actually I think this is very similar to the way we have things set up today. So the image here at the very top, you have your emperor. And this is from Japan, but feudal system is a feudal system. European systems would be the same. So instead of you have your emperor, you have your king. Okay. Now emperors and kings can be powerful, and they are powerful, but they're not as powerful as the landowners. Okay. So kings come and go, they can be overthrown, they can be removed, they can be a lot of things. But landowners aren't going anywhere. Okay. So you have your emperor, which would be your ruler. You have your daimyos, which would be your landowners. These are the powerful people within society. They hold the most power. You have your samurai, which would be the warriors. And then you have your largest class, which would be peasants and artisans. These are going to be individuals that have specific tasks, some skill, definitely some skill. And then you have the lowest class, which will be merchants, okay? This is a Japanese one. And honestly, a feudal system, all feudal systems for the most part are exactly the same. It's all based on land ownership. And even today, I'd argue it's very similar to this, our own society. The emperor, we can argue he might be the president. But is the president the most powerful person in the country? No, he's not. They never have been and never will be. Are they powerful? Yeah, powerful. The emperors are powerful individuals, so are presidents. But they're not as powerful as landowners. Or in today's society, the individuals who own the means of production or control data and information. Those are our new landowners. Then you have your samurai, which would be law enforcement, police. Then you have your largest class, which would be peasants, artisans. We can argue these individuals will probably be like middle class. And then you have your merchants, which would be working class. So our society is set up very similar to a feudal system. The only difference between the two, our society today and a feudal system, is that feudal systems are based off of land ownership, and our system today is based off of, at least what I would argue, controlling information and data. Okay. All right. So industrialized society. The Industrial Revolution hit in Europe. Okay. So Europe experienced a dramatic rise in technological invention that influenced people's daily lives. And what you have is the creation of mass production. So this is going to be urbanization. This is going to be manufacturing on a scale that has never been seen before, right? This is something entirely new. So what you have is individuals leaving rural agrarian life and moving into urban centers and cities to go work in these new factories. Okay, so the advancing technology changed how we lived. It changed us from living in rural areas to urban areas. Okay, and you got to think about it. It's the idea of, like, if you were a kid, if you're in your early teens, late teens, and you spent your life on a farm, and then you had an opportunity to go move to a city, an urban city, something you've never seen before. Okay, and the city's full of people from around the world, or at least the area, and everybody's working in one particular area, doing one particular type of job, or specific jobs within a factory. Think about it. You'd be living amongst people that you've never seen before. It would be exciting. It'd be like the idea of living in a rural area within the United States, and then going to LA or to New York or to a large city. Okay, I don't know if any of you have ever had relatives or family that lived in rural areas or grew up in, on a farm, and what their experience was, actually going to the city for the first time. I would imagine something very similar to that. If you're given the option to stay on a farm or go to a city, I'd argue a lot of people will just choose the city. Much more exciting, especially for that age group. Okay, and it is in the city life, this industrial urbanization that sociology was born out of. Okay, so what you have is your founding fathers, right? For sociology, you got individuals like Comte, Durkheim, Marx, Weber. So a lot of the individuals who saw the shift from rural agrarian life, pre-industrial life, and the shift to post-industrial life. Okay, so they saw what happened to us as a species, as a civilization, as a society. They saw how we changed, how technology changed us. Okay, and that's where sociology came from. And this is just an image of what life was like, or some images. This is going to be in London, but some of them, it's probably here in the United States in the bottom right there. But this is factory work. Okay, so these are housing or like projects. These are going to be factory type work, and this is going to be a room where one family is going to live in. Now, granted, not all people that are moving to the cities are moving there because they want something exciting. Some of them have no choice. And think about it: in a feudal system where everything's based off of land ownership, if you're lucky enough to own land, fantastic for you, right? If you're lucky enough to be born into a family who owns land, you're doing just fine. But if you weren't, and you didn't win the birth lottery, and your family owned no land, what are you going to inherit? Nothing. Your family doesn't own anything. So in feudal systems, what will happen is that people will work, families will work for landowners for generations. So I could own land, but I'm not working myself. I don't have to. What I'll do is I'll have a family live on my land that I own and have them work that land. And what they get back is the right to live on that land. So as long as they're working the land that belongs to me, they get to stay there generation after generation. If at any point in time I decide I'm no longer happy with them and I want to remove them from my land, I can. And once that happens, those people are essentially starving at that point. There's not much else for them to do. But with the Industrial Revolution, people who didn't own land or couldn't find land to work now could go find work in a city. Okay. Now, this is us. This is the society we live in today. So, post-industrial society, this is us. Information-based societies. This is the world that we live in now. Okay. So, what's important today is the production of information and services. We live in a service-based society. It's no longer based on material goods or production of material goods for the most part. We do produce a lot here, but not in the way where it's going to sustain us as a country, okay, as a society. Right now, who controls the information is where the power or money comes from, okay? So members of a post-industrial society are likely to be employed as sellers of service, software, programmers, or business consultants. And social classes will be divided by access to education. So essentially the idea is without technological skills, you do not fare well in this technologically advanced society that controls information. Okay, so what I want you to think about is individuals. Well, who are our powerful individuals in society? Who are our billionaires? Okay, uh, Zuckerberg is one of our billionaires, right? Zuckerberg is an individual responsible for Facebook. He's worth, I don't know, 65, 70 billion, give or take. Okay, but what does he do? Does he produce anything? Does he manufacture anything? What does he actually own? Zuckerberg. He owns Facebook. But what is Facebook, though, right? What is it? It's a site. It's this place that we go to, right, in the internet world, right, where we essentially sell ourselves, right? We give ourselves to Facebook. We go ahead and we create our little profiles, we make our little friends, and we share information back and forth with our friends and family, so on and so forth, right? But we're not just sharing it with our friends and family, we're also sharing all that information with Facebook. And what Facebook does is sells that information. Facebook, like I said, does not create anything. There's no products that you get from Facebook. Facebook is just a place where we go where we share information. But the information that we're sharing, once we go on Facebook to share it, doesn't belong to us anymore. Now it belongs to Facebook. So Facebook makes its money through advertising, selling us things, and selling our information to advertisers and marketers. I think Facebook made, I don't know, couple $1 billion just from one company. I think it was like Starbucks last year. Ridiculous amounts of money from advertising. But that's the world we live in. It's all about information. Who controls it? Who has access to it? How much does it cost to have access to that information? This is where we're at now. Okay? It's not about land ownership anymore. Land ownership doesn't determine who's powerful and who's not powerful. It's controlling information. And in order to be a person who controls information, or to be a powerful individual in our society today, you will need skills. And those skills, like I said before, social classes, right? It divides us. The education that we have access to, the skills that we're able to obtain, will determine how successful we'll be in this new post-industrial society. All right, now we're going to shift gears a little bit to the stuff I actually like talking about a lot. This is where I'm at. I love me some theories. I love me some concepts. Okay, so theoretical perspectives. We're going to cover, functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Okay, so like I told you guys before, the founding fathers of sociology witnessed the shift from rural agrarian life, so pre-industrial societies, into post-industrial societies. Okay, this new world, the Industrial Revolution. Okay, they saw the Industrial Revolution take place, and these individuals who saw it take place saw what it did to us as a society. Okay, now each one will have a different take on what it did to us. Okay, functionalism will have terms, conflict there will have its own terms, and so will symbolic interactionism. But they're all the result of watching the world change as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so for functionalism, we're going to be using Durkheim a lot. Okay, so for Durkheim, society is greater than the sum of its parts. So the idea is it's not about the individual. The individual is not important in society. It's the group. It's the whole. Okay, I'm sure you guys have heard this. For the greater good. Okay, as long as society is functioning well, that's all that matters. You might have individuals within that society who are not happy, that are not benefiting, but as long as the majority is okay and doing well, that's the priority, okay? And he also came up with the idea of the collective conscious. So, which is the communal beliefs, morals, and attitudes of a society that creates a collective conscience. So, what a collective conscience is, essentially, the rules and guidelines that we've been socialized to adhere to. So we've already talked about folkways, mores, and laws, right, which are norms. Okay, this is the same thing. This actually, all these things go together. So folkways, mores, and laws would be the collective or communal belief systems, moral beliefs, and attitudes of a society. Okay, so as an individual, so when you're born, right, you're born into the families. We're born into the families, whatever families we're born into, and those families will teach us about beliefs. They'll teach us morality. The attitudes of our parents become our attitudes. Okay? That is a collective conscience. Okay? That is social integration. Okay? We are connected into the societies that we are born into. And the way we stay connected to those societies is through those collective belief systems. Okay? So really what the idea is, you're born in society. You learn exactly what you need to do, what you need to believe in order to function well in that. And if you deviate from that, you will be punished, right? Those are the whole folkways, mores, and laws, the whole sanctioning aspect of it, okay? But collective conscience is society, okay? The expectation of that society has for you as an individual would be the collective conscience. Okay, and the whole concept of society as a living organism, we've covered that. Okay, and I do like this quote from Durkheim. Man is a moral being only because he lives in a society. Let all social life disappear and morality will disappear with it. So what is he saying with this quote, right? What does he mean by this? And what he really means is morality is something that is socially constructed. If society did not exist, social life did not exist, if a collective conscience did not exist, morality wouldn't exist. Laws wouldn't exist. Okay? The idea is we've created that for ourselves. Okay? Morality isn't something that we're born with. Okay? It's not something that's inherent. It's something that is learned. All right. So social facts. We've talked about this. So social facts are patterns of behavior that are capable of exerting some level of coercive power on an individual. So argue that social facts are sui generis, right? And we'll talk about sui generis. But what social facts are would be norms. We've talked about that already. Folkways, mores, and laws are social facts. Okay? And social facts is our society's way of sanctioning people for behavior that we want or don't want. Okay? And we're actually seeing quite a lot of this happening right now in our society with social facts, folkways, mores, and laws, and just really social sanctioning. Right? I'm sure you guys right now, and however you feel about wearing masks or not wearing masks during our COVID-19 pandemic, I'm not asking you to. I'm not concerned with which side of the fence you're on and should you wear them or should not wear them, but just think about society. Think about the things we've seen on the news recently about both camps. There's one group of individuals who believe that you shouldn't wear them, that doesn't do anything. And there's another group of people that argue that you should, right? Because it's essentially preventing you from infecting me and me from infecting you. But that's not really what I want to focus on. What I want to focus on is the sanctioning that happens depending on what side of the fence you're on. So think about it. You've seen on the news, right? Of people in supermarkets losing their minds when somebody tells them to put on a mask, right? There's been quite a few videos, I think, just this week of people in stores, being asked to put masks on by employees, and then they lose it. So they start throwing groceries. They start fighting with people. Okay, well, think about really what that is. These are social facts, behaviors, right? So in the climate and the world that we live in right now, a new social fact is based on the government, based on the state, is that we are required to wear masks. That is a social fact, right? So if you look at folkways, mores, and laws, some people will argue that wearing a mask could be a folkway violation, right? If you don't wear one. So if you don't wear a mask, you're just being rude to people around you. That's a folkway violation, okay? More violation, I'm not sure if there's a moral issue with wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. Depends on how you want to frame that. Then we go down to the third one, the third norm, which is laws. Now, if it's an ordinance, if it's a city ordinance, that means they could find you. That would be a law, right? That's codified expectation of behavior. Okay? So think about it. If you're in a supermarket, if I walk into a store, right, and the store says right in the front, a huge sign saying anybody entering the store has to wear a mask. And I decide, nope, I don't want to wear a mask, but I'm still going to walk in. Okay, that's a social fact. I should be wearing a mask, right? These are rules, expectations from society that I should adhere to. If I walk into that store, I will be sanctioned potentially by individuals from that store. They'll tell me to put a mask on. I could comply, I might not. That's not the point. The point is that there's an expectation for you to comply to social facts or expectations of behavior. Okay, and then we have the concept of sui generis, right, which means of its own or unlike anything else, right? So social facts were to be considered real and existed outside the individual. And what Durkheim means by this and what the point of this is those social facts, the expectations of society, the collective consciousness exists whether or not I exist as an individual, whether you exist as individuals. The idea is the society and everything that makes up society, all the rules, all the expectations of behavior, the values, the morals, the beliefs, all that. All those things exist before I existed. They'll exist while I am here, and once I am dead, they will continue to exist. Okay? So social facts were to be considered real and existed outside the individual. Okay? You may not believe in certain social facts, but just because you don't believe in them doesn't mean that you are not still expected to adhere to them by society as a whole. Okay? Society as a whole will go ahead and make you put on that mask. That's the example we're going to be using. That's actually, I think, a pretty good example, right? Social facts are considered to be real and exist outside the individual. So even as an individual who doesn't believe that I should be wearing a mask, if I choose not to wear a mask, I can be judged. I can be sanctioned. And it goes the other way too. There's groups within our society who feel that masks are unnecessary, that they don't do what scientists say that they do, and they choose not to wear masks. So it could be a situation where if I did wear a mask and I went to an area or community where it was opposite, where individuals felt that I shouldn't be wearing a mask or there was no need to, I could be judged and sanctioned for wearing a mask. Like I said, what I'm trying to talk about is not about masks in themselves as far as the political issues that we've seen as a result of them. It's just the behavior itself for sanctioning. So the takeaway from this slide here is social facts, norms, folkways, mores, and laws exist outside of us as individuals. Okay? Okay, so for Durkheim, Durkheim was really interested and really concerned with understanding how greater society impacts the individual, or how the individual is impacted by greater society, or large society as a whole, or larger society. Okay, so he came up with the concept of the idea of dual consciousness. Okay, so what this is, or what he argues, is that each and every one of us has two consciousnesses that we have to contend with, that essentially go not essentially contend with, but go hand in hand. Okay, and the first conscience maintains our connection to group identity. So really what he's saying with this is our first conscience is the conscience that is connected to what our family wants from us, from what our friends want from us, what our employers want from us, what society wants from us as a whole. Okay? If you're a particularly religious person, you can throw that in too. So your first conscience maintains your connection with external forces, external belief systems, expectations of behavior. And then you have a second conscience, and this is your personal, and this would be considered an intimate part of you, or us. And this maintains and shapes us as individuals. But he argues that the second conscience is the side of us that seeks to satisfy our wants and desires. So this is where the first and second become, where they are almost at odds with one another. So the idea is that your second conscience is going to be essentially connected to the things that you want. So your base desires, okay? And your base desires may conflict with society, okay? So example of this, right, would be, let's say I grew up in a particular religious family, and I met somebody, and I wanted to move in with them. And we're not married, but I don't have the money to get married. I'm not really interested in getting married. Like, all I want to do is cohabitate with this person that I have met. Okay? So, my desire to move in with them, my desire to be intimate with this person, could be, or I would argue, would be my second conscience, right? This is a personal and intimate desires that I have. Okay, now depending on the community I belong to, that could be a problem. So if I am a very devout Catholic person or a very devout religious person, okay, that religious institution that I'm a part of could have sanctions for a certain behavior like cohabitating. So what do? Do I give into my second conscience and cohabitate, or do I adhere to society's expectations of me and not cohabitate? And this is the dual conscience, right? This is how we're at odds, how the individual can be at odds with society as a whole. Okay. Now I could choose to cohabitate, but if I do, then there'll be repercussions, which we talked about, right? When it comes to like moral violations, and that's really what I'm talking about, moral violations. So first conscience is the conscience that is connected to everything that society wants from you, good and bad. And the second conscience is our personal desires, and those desires and those wants are checked by that first conscience. A good way to think about it would be like that little voice inside of your head, right? If you're familiar with Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket's supposed to be his conscience, right? And that's what it is. So think about that little voice inside your head. When you want to do something and you think, should I do that? If I do that, what's going to happen to me? So that's actually a pretty good way to think about it. When you want to do something, well, whatever it is that you want to do, and you stop, something stops you, and there's that voice in your head saying, don't do that, because if you do, your parents are going to find out, they're going to be mad, your significant other's going to be mad, your boss is going to be mad, the community's going to be mad at you. Like, society will come down on you if you do this thing. And you don't do it because you know that if you do, you're going to get in trouble. Or you will be sanctioned by members of your society. That is the first conscience, okay? It's what keeps us from deviating from what's considered normal behavior, okay? Now, a problem that Durkheim had with Industrial Revolution is he argued that in the modern society that we live in today, we are disconnected from one another, and disconnected in such a way where those rules and regulations don't apply. So I've talked about this before, right, with folkways, mores, and laws. What the argument is, or at least the way Durkheim sees it, is that we are way too different from one another. We don't share the same conscience, right? We're not the same collective conscience for the most part. We're very different from one another, so it's very difficult for us to sanction one another, okay? This is a problem, okay? And he argued that the modern individual has not been properly integrated into society. Well, the problem why we haven't been properly integrated into society, according to Durkheim, is because what society are we being integrated into? Okay? It's not like in pre-industrial societies where if you lived in a rural agrarian life, mostly, and when you think of like rural agrarian life, I want you to think of something like the Amish community or the Mennonites or a religious community where everybody's the same religion, dresses the same, behaves the same expectations. That's a good example of pre-industrial life. But today, what are the social facts? What things can we agree on socially that everybody should adhere to, right? It's difficult. You look at the world we live in now. Look at all the chaos that we have within our own country of people who do not share the same social facts, that do not share the same collective community. Okay, so we do not share the same social facts, and because we do not share the same social facts, we are weakly integrated into society, and that creates chaos. That creates issues, according to Durkheim. And one of the issues that it does create would be the concept of anomie. So anomie is a feeling of chaos and normlessness, okay? The lack of normal ethical or social standards, So think about it, like I told you guys before. Think of all the things that are happening that you see on the news in the world around us right now. You know, what some people feel is normal behavior and acceptable behavior uh, is not. You depending on what side of the fence you're on politically, and I don't want this to be a political thing because actually at this point now, politics should have nothing to do with anime for the most part. I want to keep it separate. Anime, really, what it is not being connected into society or being poorly connected into society. And when we're poorly connected into society, we suffer from it, and we suffer from it in a way where we, it could be a situation where we have our individuals who are like incels, right? If you guys have heard that term recently, men that, feel like they're being, shunned away from society. They don't have normal relationships with women. They can't make friends. It's one of those deals where people, who aren't properly integrated or can't properly integrate, they suffer for it. And this is the thing. As a species, we do not do well on our own. As a species, we need to be part of a group. And when it's hard to be part of a group, doesn't matter what the group is, we suffer for it, okay? So enemy is a situation where society no longer has the support of a firm collective consciousness. And I'd argue right now, within our own country, we do not have a firm collective consciousness. We have multiple different groups, multiple different views, belief systems of morality. When we have too many different systems, it creates chaos. Was what Durkheim would argue. Okay, so people, while more independent and complex, are also alienated from each other. So what this is going to argue is that even though we all live in, let's say, Southern California, we all live in Orange County, or a lot of us live in Orange County, LA County, we all live in Southern California, right? A pretty small geographical area. The idea is that we're alienated from each other. We're disconnected from one another. And this is an issue, okay? Even today, even the way you look at our semester, right, our summer, we're not connected. We're not, even if we were in a classroom. You guys have all been in the classroom setting. Yeah, you may make friends with people within the classroom, but for the most part, you're strangers. Right now, I'm a stranger to you, you're a stranger to me. Think about, when we were in a classroom setting, you were still strangers, right? I mean, you might know somebody's first name, last name, maybe a little information about them, but still strangers, okay? And that's at school. That's in your classroom. You're strangers. So think about how many people go to Santa Ana College. Think of how many people go to Santa Ana College, Santo Kenyan College, Fullerton College. Think about all the different colleges, strangers. Think about all the people you work with, strangers. You have your friend groups, you have your family groups, you have your co-workers, but other than that, strangers. And that's the society that we live in today. We're strangers from one another, okay? For better or for worse, according to Durkheim, it would be for worse, because since we're all strangers, we do not have a collective conscience, and since we don't have a collective conscience, people get shunned, people get pushed away, people feel like they don't belong. That creates enemy, which is a feeling of chaos and normlessness, and society starts to suffer, okay? Now, enemy can also be the result of quick and sudden shifts in society or an individual's life. So it'd be a situation where, like, look at what's happened recently, right? We're now in another recession. The country's in chaos. In 2008, we had another recession. We had the mortgage industry collapse and then recession. So that is enemy. Okay, when things move too quickly, enemy. And that's what he argued happened in the Industrial Revolution. He argued that people shifted way too quickly from rural agrarian life into industrial life, and we weren't ready for it. It happened too quickly, and we didn't adjust well. So Durkheim's going to argue there's two causes of enemy, and the first would be division of labor and rapid social change, which I kind of already talked about. Okay, and both are going to be the result of modernization. So division of labor is essentially the idea that we're going to have specific jobs now. So like I said, in a rural agrarian life, there was no division of labor for the most part. Everybody worked on the farm, and everybody did farm work. And today, we don't do that. Today, my job is very different from your jobs. Your jobs are probably different from your parents' jobs. When you go to work, just one thing that you do at that job, and that's it. We're divided in the type of labor that we do. And the sad part about division of labor, it makes it difficult for us to care about one another in any meaningful, significant way. And I don't mean to sound horrible when I say this, but I find it hard to care about other people's jobs, and other people find it hard to care about mine. And that sounds really, really horrible, I know. But think about it, right? Let's say for whatever reason I wasn't able to continue with this class. They'd find somebody else to replace me, right? So, get somebody else in there. Students, if you're not able to come to class and you get dropped or you remove yourself, but the class still goes on. Think about it. Life still goes on. Society still moves forward. That is functionalism. That's the concept, okay? The concept is as long as the majority is doing well, that's the goal, okay? As long as the majority does well, it's okay that we leave a few people behind, right? Minority group, where we're not worried about them. So that's anime. That's division of labor, rapid social change, okay? The idea is that the type of work that we do now is so specialized and so different from one another that we're no longer connected in any meaningful, significant way, okay? So, not to beat a dead horse, the division of labor in society, I've already covered this. So essentially the idea is the big take home for this is that modern society essentially has been unable to create a collective conscience where everybody feels integrated, and has actually done the opposite. Instead of integrating people, it has alienated people and pushed people away. Our modern society creates division as opposed to unity, and that's an issue Durkheim had with functionalism, or the way modern society was working. Okay, so this is a concept Durkheim came up with or developed, and the idea is mechanical solidarity. So mechanical solidarity is something that existed very well in pre-industrial societies, and essentially the idea is things are done this way because they have always been done this way, okay? And it ties into like a collective conscience, okay? Essentially, if I was born in a farm, and the example I'm using here would be an Amish community. So if I was born into an Amish community, okay, this is the life I'm going to have. It's going to be farm life. It's going to be rural. It's going to be agrarian, and the way they conduct their lives is essentially the same way they conducted them for hundreds of years. The idea is that this is the way they've done things for years, for decades, for generations. Why change them? So there's the idea that they don't use automobiles, they don't use electricity. They still do things the way that we did them in pre-industrial societies. Okay, so that would be an example of mechanic solidarity, right? The idea that things are done mostly because they have always been done that way. Okay, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. The use of technology is kind of, I don't want to say stalled, but for lack of a better term, stalled. And the reason why it's stalled is because they believe that there's no need for it. There's no need for any more advancements. The way we do things now is sufficient. We are sustaining ourselves with the technology that we have now, the way we do things now, and there's no need to change. Okay, so Amish community would be a good example of what I would argue would be a rural agrarian life, at least in the way we can see it today. This is still a living, breathing way of life. Okay, so when people tend to do the same type of work, they tend to think alike and act alike, and that creates a mechanic solidarity. So if I was Amish, there's a religious component that everybody has. There's, as far as clothing, everybody dresses the same way. There might be some variation in the shades of blue or the shades of pink or whatever it is you're wearing, but the idea is you're all wearing the same type of clothes, same type of haircuts, you're building the same types of homes, doing the same type of work. Everybody is doing the exact same thing. And when everybody does the exact same thing, it builds solidarity. Okay? And the world we live in today, We are not doing this. We lack solidarity in the world we live in today. Okay, so organic solidarity is another concept, and this is based around the acceptance of economic and social differences. And what the argument is that organic solidarity works in the world we have today because everybody has a special job that they do, and as long as everybody does those special jobs, we all function well. We all benefit from that. So example would be, like the image to the right. We have individuals in a factory building John Deere tractors. Okay, so we have people with specialized occupations building those tractors. And then we got an image at the top. We got a farmer using that tractor to farm, produce, produce. So it's a circle, right? You got people that work at factories, produce machinery. The machinery is used to produce goods. Those goods are sold to those individuals who build the tractors in the factory. So essentially, everybody in our society today has a specific job, and as long as everybody does their specific job, society will function. Okay. All right, now we're shifting over to conflict theory. Okay, so Karl Marx and conflict theory. We've covered this. So for Marx, conflict in society is a primary means of change. Marx argued there will be a revolution, right? Eventually, a capitalist society will fall, and there will be a new utopian society to take its place. Okay, so economic conflict exists between the owners of the means of production, which he considered the bourgeoisie, and the laborers, which are the proletariat. Okay, these revolutions or class antagonisms is what he refers to them as, because it's a issue and a conflict between two different class systems, or class systems is what it would be, and they would be the result of one class dominating another. Okay, and the owners of production become more and more exploitative towards the working class. So, what has happened according to Marx, in our post-industrial, so you have your industrial society, then you have your post-industrial society, right? So pretty much what Marx is going to argue is that we no longer own the means of production. And what he means by this is we don't own the factories, we don't own anything that we produce, we don't own the raw material, we own nothing. The only thing we have is our ability to labor. That's the only thing we're selling now, is our ability to work for somebody else. And this is a horrible, horrible bargaining chip. Okay, so the problem is it puts us in a position where we're going to be where we will be exploited. Okay, as workers, because at this point now, the only thing we have to sell is our ability to labor. And if I don't want to labor for X amount of dollars for X amount of hours that you're offering me, that's fine. I don't have to do that work, but there's somebody who will. Okay. So it essentially what it does is it exploits people. Okay, and the image to the right here would be an example of class antagonisms, at least a modern day example of class antagonisms. You have the bourgeoisie, which would be the individuals who own the means of production. And in this image here, I'd argue, this would be in San Francisco, I believe, but it's happening all over the country. The bourgeoisie would be the individuals who own factories, who own real estate, who own the apartments that we rent, those types of things. So those would be the individuals who have the power within our society. And the conflict comes when those individuals who own, the homes that we live in are able to price us out and evict us so they can make more money. So this is happening a lot in a lot of cities. Gentrification, you got a lot of individuals coming in, putting a lot of money down on properties, changing the neighborhood, and essentially bringing it up to a middle-class standard, and it pushes a lot of people out. So this would be a class antagonism, right? You got two classes. You got individuals who are wealthy, essentially landowners or real estate owners, and then you have individuals who are poor or working class, who are not able to afford rent anymore. So that's a class antagonism. All right, so this is important. This is like test stuff important. So, Marx described modern society in terms of alienation. So, where Durkheim had anomie, Marx is going to have alienation. Okay? So, alienation, he has four kinds of alienation. Okay? So, alienation refers to the condition in which the individual is isolated from his or her own society, work, or a sense of self. So, very similar to Durkheim, right? once again, they're all going to be similar because it's all society and how it affects us. But for Marx, he uses the term alienation. So the first form of alienation is going to be the alienation from one's own labor. And what he's arguing is that in pre-industrial societies, we were very connected to our own labor because it was, the farms that we worked on, the farms that we owned. So everything I did in that farm was special to me because it was my farm. If you look at the Amish community, those are the barns they're building, or they're building their own homes, their own barns, they're building their own lives. So the work they do, there's almost essentially what it is their pride in ownership, a pride in craftsmanship, right? I'm building this house because it's going to be my house. This is important to me. That is shifted. So we're alienated from the work itself. No ability to relate to the product we labor on, okay? We don't care about the products that are being made. We don't care about the service for the most part that we're providing. We only care that we have a job. So, obviously this talks a lot about manufacturing, right? Products that are made, products that are not made, things like that. But it'll still apply to the society we live in today, where our data-based society. I mean, think about it. Most jobs that we're going to have are going to be service-based jobs, which means it's like retail, where you're providing some sort of service to somebody. Okay, but think about it. In a service-based job, you may be polite to somebody. You may act a certain way that's congenial just because you're expected to, right? But you're not doing it because you really want to. You're not doing it because you feel like you may, like, if anybody's ever gone to work one day and they're not in a good mood, but you know that you can't take your bad mood to work, right? Because you have to be polite. You have to, as customers, we expect a certain level of, behavior from people that are in service-based industries, okay? And that alienates us, from the work that we're doing. So alienation from one's own labor. We are disconnected from the jobs that we are doing. We no longer care about them. We only care that they exist, okay? So this is a result of the Industrial Revolution. The second form of alienation is going to be alienation from the process of one's own labor, okay? So the idea is, in rural agrarian life, the farm that you work on is your farm, okay? You control everything on that farm. The size of the barn, you house your animals, the type of tools that you use, the house that you live in, like everything on that farm is up to you as far as how you want it to go. Today, we have no control, or very, very little control over the environments that we work in. So whatever type of job you have, think about it. How much do you control when you go into work? So if you work at a restaurant, what do you control when you go into the restaurant? You're probably wearing a uniform. You don't control the menu. You can't, come up with something and put on the menu yourself. Like, there's a menu you have to follow. There's a dress code you have to follow. There's probably some sort of, maybe even, what do they call them? Like canned responses. Hello, thank you, welcome to whatever. Like, for my example, I used to work in an office for a mortgage company. I worked there for longer than I should have. But in that office, when I was working there, I walked in to my little cubicle. Did I have control over that cubicle? No. Not even a little bit. I could decorate my cubicle, but that was about it. But I had no control over where that cubicle was at. I had no control over who I sat next to. I had no control over anything other than what little posters I wanted to put in my cubicle. And that's sad. I remember I worked there for about a year or two. I think it was about 2 years. And then we changed buildings. And the new building we went into, my new cubicle was by the window. And I was so excited. I was so excited. As a grown person. I'm a full-grown person, grown man. Excited like a little kid because I have a cubicle with the window. I can see outside. That's sad. That's super sad. That's where we're at, folks. This is the world we live in. Where I'm excited about having access to a window where I can see outside. You're working 40 plus hours a week inside a cubicle. You can't see outside. Like, you don't know if it's sun out. You know the sun's out. You don't know if it's dark. Like, you don't know nothing. Like, you go in this cubicle and you're just there for hours. Answering phones. Canned responses. That's what we're doing. That's what I was doing. My 8-hour day was answering the phone saying, "Thank you for calling New Century Mortgage. My name is Sergio. How can I help you?" "Oh, you're looking to refinance your home? Fantastic, sir. What type of property do you own? Is it mobile, manufactured home? Oh, great. We can go ahead and transfer you over to one of our loan officers. Let me go ahead and get you over there, sir." Like canned responses for hours. Completely alienated from my work. And if any of you ever worked at anywhere, a cubicle, office building in a cubicle, or a supermarket, or not so much supermarkets. Supermarkets aren't so bad for that. But it's still supermarkets are a tough job. But like if you ever worked like at a store where you had to have like a certain response, thank you for coming in, and you have the little thing, like maybe you have a pitch where you have to sell somebody, upgrade somebody on a membership or something. Like those are all things that disconnect us and alienate us from the work that we're doing. We have no creative outlet when it comes to our work anymore. Okay, you go into work, you do what you're told, and that's it. You don't get to be creative at work anymore, at least for most people. Okay. Alienation from others. All right, so alienation from others is really what it is. Workers are forced to compete rather than cooperate, right? Amish community, not for the most part, but I'd argue there might be some conflict in Amish communities, I'm sure, but for the most part, Amish communities do not allow individuals within the communities or families in communities to fail. Because if one family fails, it hurts other families. All right. So the idea is that we in an Amish community or rural type community, agrarian life, we want members of our community to succeed, right? Because those members of our community are significant to us, right? Like I told you guys, think about living in a community that's very similar to the Amish community. Okay, you're probably related to one another by marriage or something along those lines. You all go to the same church. You all do the same type of work. So the idea is that the stronger the individual is, the stronger the community is within those types of environments. All right, that's not the world we live in today. Today we're forced to compete with one another, and we compete with them. We are constantly competing for resources. Think about classes. You guys are competing for classes. I had a lot of people on a wait list. I'm sure you guys have all been on a wait list at least once in your life. Competing for classes, competing for parking. When we're actually back on campus. I'm sure you guys remember those days when you're on your way to class. You got like 20 minutes to get to class, and you've been driving around for 40 minutes looking for parking. At that point, do you feel alienated from other people? I argue that you do, right? And the reason why I argue that you feel alienated from people in that situation is because think about it, right? When you're in classroom setting, so just imagine, right, when we used to actually be inside a classroom, you were friendly to everybody in that class for the most part, right? If somebody needed a pencil, you'd happily give them a pencil. If somebody needed some paper or Scantron, you'd be more than happy to give somebody in class a Scantron on test day, right? Super friendly to one another, right? In the classroom. But I'm telling you, if you're late for class and you've been circling that parking lot for like 20, 30, 40 minutes trying to find parking, do you at least, I don't know about you, but for me, do you get a little competitive? Do you get a little angry? Do you get a little frustrated with other people? Do you become alienated from other people? Are you as friendly? Let's put it this way. You're driving around for 40 minutes. You're looking for parking. And somebody starts backing out. And you come up to take that spot, right? But just as you come up to take that spot, another person comes up to take that spot. What do? Right? In a classroom setting, you're more than willing to be nice to one another. But man, not when you're late for class and you've been driving around for 40 minutes looking for parking. Parking becomes a resource that is, scarce certain times. And now we're competing at, for parking, or we're competing for jobs. I'm not sure if you guys have ever been in a position where you're at work and there's a positioning opening up and it would be a promotion for you. And now you got to compete with your coworkers. Anybody ever been at work and have somebody at work throw them under the bus? I have. And if you haven't, you're still young. You probably will one day. Have to compete with somebody you work with and realize that your coworkers are out to get you. And the reason why they're out to get you is because we live in a society now where it forces us to do that. Because the idea is if I don't get them, they're going to get me. If I don't do this, if I don't get this promotion, if I don't drive myself forward, I suffer and my family suffers. Nobody else is going to take care of me. Oh, nobody else is going to look after me. Okay? And this is a sad thought. This is a very, very sad thought for us. This is the world that we live in now. I mean, think about it, right? Imagine yourself in a classroom. Imagine this wasn't online. Imagine we're all sitting in a classroom in air conditioning, right? Say in a college. Think about the 40 people in the classroom, or let's say 40 people in the classroom. Now think about this. If half the class lost its job, would you care? Ask yourself that. Would you care? And most of us would say, yeah, we would care, right? Because we're all properly socialized individuals, and we all been socialized to know that people losing their jobs is a bad thing. We do care about that, right? Then ask yourself, how much do you care? How much will we care? So if half the class lost its job, would the other half of the class be like, hey, we got to come up with a way to, help the other half of the class pay bills, No, we wouldn't. We'd feel bad. We'd say, you know what, keep your chin up. Don't worry. Things will get better. Something will come up. Whatever you'd say to somebody, right? You tell them to, be strong. You'll find another job. Things will work out. That's the most you're going to give the other half of the class, right? Why? Why wouldn't you help out your other classmates? The reason why you wouldn't help them out is because we're not significant to one another. We have been alienated from others within our society. Okay? It's just not how we function anymore. Amish community. If I lived in an Amish community and my barn burnt down or my house burnt down, guess what? The whole community gets together and they build me a new house, and they build me another barn, or they help me with whatever it is I need help with, because they're not going to allow me to fail. In our society today, we allow people to fail. Okay. Very horrible. And then we have alienation from oneself. All right. The final outcome of industrialization is the loss of connectivity from the worker and his or her own occupation. So essentially what this is arguing is that what he's arguing is the work that we do now is unfulfilling. Okay. Now, Marx didn't really use the term soul when he talked about a lot of these things. What he uses the term species being. And what he means by species being is pretty much he's referring to your soul or our souls. And what the species being is us as an animal, as an individual, lacking any kind of connectivity, or I'm trying to think of a better word. Fulfilling. That's what I'm looking for. We are not fulfilled by the work that we do today. In the society that we live in, the work that we do leaves us empty, leaves us disconnected. Okay? Think about the work that you do now. Okay? Whatever jobs you have. Do you feel fulfilled by that job? Do you go to work and happy to go to work, happy all day at work with whatever it is that you're doing, whatever task you have, and then when you leave, you feel good about the work that you did that day? I'm not saying that doesn't exist, because it definitely still exists, but I'd argue it's not the majority. I argue the majority of people today work because they have to, and they are disconnected from the work that they do. They're not fulfilled by the work that they do. Some people are, but they would be a minority. I argue that the people that are fulfilled by the work they do would be considered a minority. Most people would simply just work because they need to make money. Okay? And this is an issue, right? So the final outcome, according to Marx, of industrialization is the loss of connectivity from worker and their own occupation, right? There's nothing that ties the worker to the labor anymore. There's no longer a sense of self, a sense of accomplishment in the work that's being done or the tasks that are being done, okay? There's no incentive to take pride in anything that we're doing, right? As workers, we just become another part of a machine, okay? And think about the jobs that you have, right? Or if you don't have jobs right now, if you're in a situation where you haven't the luxury, right, to not to have to work just yet, think about the type of work that your parents do, or relatives or friends. How connected are they to their occupations? Maybe some of them are, maybe some of them aren't. But this is what Marx considered alienation from oneself. We become alienated from the tasks that we do because they're no longer fulfilling to us. Okay, it's just a job. My time at the office in the cubicle completely disconnected from the work I was doing. Okay, maybe some of you know what I'm talking about, and maybe some of you don't, but don't worry, you're still young. There's plenty of chances, plenty of opportunity for you to get jobs that you don't like. False consciousness. This is something we have talked about, though, right? False consciousness is the idea, or essentially it's a condition where we buy into a false narrative, right? This is a situation where we've been duped, okay? So with the false consciousness, what it's going to argue is that we go against our own best interests, okay? It's a condition in which the beliefs, ideals, or ideology of a person are not in the person's own best interests. So essentially selling our labor for, an hourly wage goes against our best interests because we're not going to get paid what we should be getting paid and what we need to be getting paid, okay? It's not going to benefit us. Think about it. I mean, God, I had a friend, years ago he worked, and also I myself too worked, like almost like 15 years ago I made like 11 something, almost $4 an hour pushing baskets, okay? That was like 10, 15 years ago. And minimum wage hasn't really improved. The minimum wage they want to hit $15, right? They're trying to push for $15 an hour for minimum wage, but think about it. $15 minimum wage, is that really going to change a lot of people's lives? How much is it going to change people's lives? Will it change people's lives? $15 an hour, 40 hours a week, you're probably, depending on how your dependents and everything, how that's set up, but you're not pulling any more than 2 G's, a month, maybe 2,000 less a month. Is $2,000 a month going to cut it in Orange County as a single individual? Maybe 2 people, right? They might be able to hack it, but $15 an hour is not a lot. Okay? It's really not. But think about it though. False consciousness. The narrative in our country today is if you work hard, you'll be successful. If you work hard, you'll succeed. All you gotta do is keep working hard. That's a false consciousness. Okay? You keep working hard at your $15 an hour job. You might be able to rent a room, maybe rent an apartment somewhere if it's 2 of you, but are you gonna be able to buy a house in Orange County at $15 an hour? The false consciousness is, us believing that as long as we work hard, we'll be successful. Not the case. Okay, workers are less likely to question their place in society and assume individual responsibility for existing conditions. And the idea is we don't, right? Do we question as workers? Do we question our place in society? Or do we just assume that the positions that we're in now are our faults? And I argue that we do. We assume that the positions we're in right now because we don't have enough education, or we didn't work hard enough, or I don't have enough money, or I don't have certain things, right? It's always a situation where if I'm not doing well in society, it's because it's something personal with me. It's some kind of, I'm deficient in some way, shape, or form, right? And not society. Society didn't fail me. Society is set up for anybody who, set up in such a way where anybody who wants to put in the work can be successful. That's not true, right? According to Marx. According to Marx, is not everybody's going to be middle class. Not everybody's going to be wealthy. Okay, so that is the false consciousness. Like I said, we did talk about that already. In class consciousness, I'm going to skip this. This is pretty much just us believing in the false consciousness. Us believing that, we're going to go ahead and be successful as long as we just work hard, right? Now we have Weber, right? This is going to be interactionism or symbolic interactionism. Now, so for Weber, he does focus, just like all the other ones, he focuses on society and the elements of class, power, and how it's distributed and how we're affected now, as individuals within a society now that's changed from rural to, rural agrarian life to this post-industrial life. Okay, so. The issue with Weber, though, right? Status is going to be based on economic factors such as education, kinship, and religion, okay? And status and class determine individuals' power or influence over ideas, and fear that industrialization would have a negative effect on society if taken to the extreme. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Status based on economic factors such as education, kinship, and religion. Now, according to Weber, um, education provides two things for us. It does provide us with skills, but education also provides us with status. Okay, kinship also provides us with status, and religion can also provide us or does provide us with status. So education and status, depending on, well, there are plenty of individuals who are college educated that some would argue are not intelligent, right? So essentially, the idea is if you're able to jump through the hoops and go to university somewhere, you are educated. Okay, but does that mean that you're particularly intelligent? There are a lot of people who have those college educations but not be particularly intelligent. One doesn't necessarily lead to the other. Okay, kinship, once again, it's about status. Who is your family? Does your family have a name? Okay, and then religion. So let's look at, like, I don't know, think of celebrity. Let's look at Paris Hilton, right? Because her family has had money for quite some time. Okay, so Paris Hilton is one of the heirs to the Hilton fortune, right? So Paris Hilton, her life, very wealthy. But is it her wealth the result of her education or the result of her family? I'd argue it's her family. Now, she is educated. She is college educated, but her life isn't a result of that education. It's more a result of kinship, who her family is, okay? Her family is going to provide her with her status, okay? And it could be a situation where religion can also provide you with status as well, depending on where you live. So the example would be like if you live in a country where, let's say, one religious institution reigns supreme, all other institutions may be considered would be minority, status as far as your religious affiliations, and you might be persecuted for that, or denied access to certain services because of your religion is not the same as the mainstream religion. Okay, so moving forward, modern society is centered on the concept of rationalization. Now, this is important. What rationalization does for us is it essentially gives us an excuse to do sometimes horrible things. Okay, it's a system of logic, right? So modern society is structured around logic and efficiency and not morality or tradition. So this is us being pragmatic. Okay, in the society that we live in, it's a capitalist society. So the argument is, if it makes money, it is the right thing to do. Okay, if I can make money doing this, then it is rational for me to do this because at the end I am making money. Morality doesn't play into it. If the issue, if the end is a potential to make a lot of money, it doesn't matter morally how I get there, as long as money is the end goal. So in the society that we live in today, the capitalist society that we are currently under, money is king. So if I'm going to make money doing this, then it is the right thing to do, and I justify my decisions and my behaviors based on the fact that I'm going to make money. That's how things are done. Example, from a couple of slides ago, we had the whole issue of individuals upset about rent hikes, right? So the idea is, as a real estate person, so I would say if I was in real estate, right, and owned a bunch of apartments, a bunch of condos or whatever, right, a bunch of rental properties. And the society we live in today, the goal is to make money. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to raise the rent if I can. I'm going to raise the rent as much as I possibly can based on the market. What I mean by that is I will raise the rent as high as people are willing to pay. So if the apartment should only, say the one bedroom apartment, right, in Orange County, I guess the lowest or the average would be about $1,500. Okay, so right now I can get $1,500 for my apartments, for my one bedroom apartments. I can charge $1,500 a month on that. But let's say in another 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I can get $2,000 a month. Okay. Now, based on the society we live in, what would I do? Now, I could keep all those people that are, good tenants, have been paying their $1,500 for a year or two, and because they've been good tenants, I'll just let them stay. I don't want to displace a family. I don't want to displace these people that have been here for, a couple of years. I'm just going to go ahead and keep it at $1,500. Okay, just an example, right? So you can argue that's a moral thing to do, right? That's maybe it's tradition, being nice, being kind to your fellow man. But in the world we live in today, that's not the way it functions. That's not the way it works. In the world we live in today, the idea is if I can charge $2,000 for something, when normally it would only have been $1,500, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I rationalize my decision based on the fact that capitalism is the system that we live under. I will make money. The goal is to make money. Nobody's going to go ahead and shame me for making money. That's what we're here to do. We're here to be successful, right? Chase that American dream at all costs. Okay. So for symbolic interactionism, Weber came up with the idea or the concept of the iron cage. So Durkheim has enemy, normlessness, and chaos. Marx has alienation in its four forms. And Weber has the concept of the iron cage. So what the iron cage is, or what it argues, is that rationalization in our society, bureaucracy within our society, essentially replaces tradition as the main form of operationalizing our behavior. So the idea is everything we do, we justify and rationalize in the pursuit of capitalism. Okay? So rationalization replaces traditions, values, and emotions with the reason and efficiency as its guide for society. So in the example we just talked about, if I own a bunch of rental properties, right? Rationalization will argue that I should go ahead and raise that rent to $2,000 a month. And it doesn't matter about people's emotions. It doesn't matter about the value systems, about being kind to people. All that goes out the window when the order of the day is to make money. Okay, and bureaucracy essentially leads organizations or the world empty of emotion and tradition. Okay, and what bureaucracy is an attempt to control the society that we live in, because at this point now, with the amount of people that we have to deal with the different cultural differences that we have to deal with, the state as an institution has to rely on a system, and that system is bureaucracy. And it's bureaucracy, essentially what it is, it's efficiency is what it argues for. Okay, so bureaucracy, an example of bureaucracy would be like school, right? School would be a system of bureaucracy, or even better one would be the DMV. I'm not sure if all of you have ever had the pleasure of going to the DMV, but the DMV would be an example of bureaucracy, right? When you go to the DMV, would you argue that the DMV is void of emotion and tradition for the most part? At the DMV, it's all about efficiency, right? Do you have the paperwork? No, sorry. Oh, you do have the paperwork. Oh, but you got some whiteout on here. Sorry. Oh, you do have the paperwork, but you crossed something out. Sorry. Or, we can spend all day talking about things at the DMV as far as, paperwork not being accepted. But the idea is it's a bureaucratic system, okay? There's rules and regulations that must be adhered to, and if they're not adhered to, then society falls apart. So the idea is we rationalize this bureaucratic system in the name of efficiency, okay? But we remove emotions, remove values. Do emotions have any place at the DMV? Do value systems have any place at the DMV? They do not. It serves a function, and that's all it does. That's our world, okay? And bureaucracy and rationalization and all its forms and all the institutions that we deal with create what Weber considered to be a cage, okay? He called it the iron cage. And it's the culmination of industrialization and rationalization. Individuals in their iron cage, it's us, are trapped by institutions and bureaucracy. Okay, individual will become disenchanted with the world, disconnected with the world. So essentially, it's the idea that you feel like the world doesn't care about you, that the world no longer need you. Alienated would be a good term, right? That you are no longer buying into the dream. You are essentially giving up, right? And that's what a lot of us do. Okay, bureaucracy is a result of capitalism, modernization, okay, and it traps us in a cage that prohibits freedom and it stifles creativity. So let me try and go and explain this in a way that maybe you guys might understand. Um, think about the worlds that you live in now. Think about the lives that you have now, right? Think about bureaucracy that we have to deal with. Like I said, state bureaucracy, work, bureaucracy at work, bureaucracy at school, bureaucracy everywhere you go. And the iron cage and what it really is, or what it wants you to symbolize is imagine yourself. Imagine yourself inside a giant bird cage, right? Like this little image here. You got this woman, she's in a cage, she's at work, right? She's got a little desk, she's got a chair, she's got a computer, she's got a little briefcase, so we're assuming this is work, right? So she's at work, and every single bar in that cage represents some type of bureaucracy, some type of rationalization that leaves us void of emotion and leaves us disconnected from value systems and the issues of morality. Okay, we morality and values and beliefs and all those things that culturally make us who we are essentially pushed aside because they're seen almost as baggage, right? It's the idea that, if I'm, like, go back to the idea, if I'm an individual who has real estate and I can raise my rent to $2,000, but you know what? Morally, that's the wrong thing to do. Ethically, that would be the wrong thing to do, right? I believe that you shouldn't take advantage of people, right? Those are belief systems. Does that have any place in real estate? According to the capitalist model, I'd argue no. If you feel that way, that you shouldn't get rich off of people's backs, if you feel that you shouldn't make money off of people, then maybe real estate isn't for you, right? Because the market will dictate how much money you can make. And if you own real estate and you're only charging your tenants $1,500 a month when you could be charging them $2,000 a month, you're losing money. And the capitalist model that we live under argues that that would be a mistake. If you feel bad about that, then you shouldn't be a landlord, or you shouldn't own rental property. Okay, so that's kind of that is the iron cage, right? That the world we live in is stifling, stifling us with all the different types of bureaucracy and rationalization that we do on a daily basis to justify the jobs that we have, right? I'm going to keep this horrible job in this office without a window for a couple years because I need to, because the bureaucracy involved, right? I need to make money, I need to do this, I need to do that. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, okay? And it leaves you devoid of feelings, fulfillment, okay? So this is the term that Weber used, the iron cage. Rationalization leaves us void of any kinds of emotions and feelings. It essentially prevents us from being human, okay? All right. Now, these are just some concepts that I might not spend too much time on these, but these are just some concepts that we need to be familiar with, okay, as far as this chapter and remaining chapters as well. Okay, so role and status. Okay, so roles are patterns of behavior that we recognize in each other that are representative of a person's social status. Father, son, neighbor, employee, right? So status is used to describe responsibilities and benefits that a person experiences according to their rank and role in society. Now, the image to the right, that's going to be Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry. Okay? They have roles. The role is what? The royals. Okay? They're part of the royal family. Okay? Their status. Well, what is their status? Well, as members of the royal family, they're ambassadors, right? In a sense, they carry out, and there's no more political power for the most part when it comes to the royal family, but they are definitely very powerful individuals, okay? So there is status there. There will always be status because they are essentially, well, what to argue next in line, right? If there was into the royal family, or next line to essentially, we have Queen Elizabeth, it was the second. And then you have her son, her eldest son, Prince Charles. To the left, you got William, and then you got Harry. So their status is royals. They have that. I think they're called the Duke of something or other. I forget what status they have, their actual names, but status they have nonetheless. And this is a scribe status, right? And the scribe status is status that you do not select. It's essentially something that you're born into, okay? It's something that you have no control over, right? So Prince Charles, Prince Harry, Prince William, they had no control over being born into the royal family. So that is a scribe status. And other things would be considered scribe status is maybe gender, you're male, you're female, elderly, young, things you should have control over, okay? But status and the scribe status could be being born into a royal family or being born middle class, working class, or poor, okay? Then you have a chief status. And the chief status is a status is essentially that you were not born with, but you achieve in some way, shape, or form. Okay. Now the image here, this is Bill Gates. Now, granted, Bill Gates, I believe his parents were attorneys. I'd argue he probably had like a pretty middle class, maybe upper middle class life. Like he was comfortable growing up. Okay, access to resources, things like that. Right. But now his achieved status is what? Philanthropist, billionaire. I think he's one of the richest men in the world, at least definitely up there. I think his net worth is about $108 billion. You know, he can't give his money away fast enough. And he does give a lot of his money away through philanthropy or projects and things like that. But achieved status is attained by choice. It's something that you work towards, something you weren't born with, okay? So high school dropout, self-made millionaire, or nurse, these are all things that some people argue that we made choices to do. Okay, and then you have what's called a role set. So what a role set is the idea or the concept that people have multiple different roles. So let's look at Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates runs obviously an entire business, entire company. He also has a role as a philanthropist. He has a role as a husband. He has a role as a father. I'm not sure if he has any other siblings, so he could be a brother to somebody. He has friends, I'm sure, so he has a role as a friend, and we all have these. So everybody has a role set. I'm a son. I'm a friend. I'm a part-time professor. You guys are students. You guys have jobs. Your siblings, your husbands, your wives, whatever roles you have in your life, that makes up your role set. Okay, and then there's role strain. Too much is required of a single person based on their role set, it can strain them. And this is not a hard concept to understand. Pretty much the idea is, let's say you're married, okay? So you're married. So now you're husband or your wife, okay? Now let's say you have kids. So now you're husband or wife, and now you're a parent, okay? But now let's say you work, so you're also an employee, and then you want to go back to school, so now you're a student, okay? So your life as a husband or a wife, parent, that's going to be strained there because kids are stressful, right? Then you have job, so whatever stress you have at job, that's going to conflict with your role as a parent or a husband or a wife. And then you throw in, school. You want to go back to school. So that's another role that's going to strain an already stressful situation, okay? And then you have role performance. It's how a person expresses his or her role. And that's just essentially what it's exactly what it says. When I express, it's like, what is it you're doing? Okay, so you're a husband. How do you behave as a husband? Okay, what are your expectations of a husband? What are your expectations of your wife if you're a husband? Or what are your expectations that your kids have from you, or that your friends have from you, or that your employer has from you? Okay, so role performance is essentially what that role entails as far as behavior and what others expect the behavior to be based on whatever role you're fulfilling, okay? So like I said, your kids are going to expect you to behave in one way, your significant other will, your boss will, your friends will, so on and so forth, okay? That's role performance. Like I said, not very complicated concepts, I just want you to be familiar with them, okay? So we'll use them again. All right, so that's our lecture for Chapter 4. I'll go ahead and post this as soon as possible. I'm not sure why, but my computer takes forever. And I mean forever to convert these. So I'll have to figure out a quicker way to do that. And I will go ahead and have your discussion board post later tonight. Please go ahead and try to get those discussion boards posted to me by the due dates. I'm going to be flexible with you guys, definitely, as far as turning in work. The only reason why I want you to get them in the discussion board on time, because it makes it a lot easier for me to track them. When you submit a discussion board link or an assignment, an email, or another form of messenger, it's difficult for me to track them because I get tons of email a day. I mean, tons. So you get lost. Okay, so ideally, you submit it on Canvas. It goes into the assignment link. I pull up your name in the gradebook, and bam, there's your discussion board. There's your weekly reading reflection or reading log right there for me to find. If you send an email to me with those documents in there, I lose track of them just because I get so many of them. Okay, so I know I was updating grades over the weekend, and some of you had submitted your discussion boards or other assignments, or really discussion boards, and they weren't added into your gradebook. It's because if you send it to me an email, I got to go back and try to find your emails. Okay, so bear with me on that. So like I said, just try to get those things to me by the due date, so it makes it easier for you, makes it easier for me. All right, if you have any questions, please go ahead and shoot me an email. Have a good one.